Welcome, everyone, to a few tips on dues collections. I'd like to introduce my partner for today's call, Steve Channels. He hails from our University of Connecticut chapter, Connecticut Alpha, and is a longtime SIGEP volunteer and recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus Award. He brings a lot to the table on this topic as he is both a CPA and a lawyer. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
And Chuck Stegman is from our Colorado Alpha chapter at the University of Colorado and is also a longtime SIGEP volunteer and recipient of SIGEP's Exemplary Service Award. He's chair of the SIGEP Chapter Finance and Compliance Committee.
Before we dive in, I'd like to share a story that illustrates the impact of an effective collections process. I mentored a newly elected VPF, Vice President of Finance, who inherited severe financial problems. There was a major problems with accounts receivable. Because of that, the chapter was months behind in paying rent for their house and had no money for activities. A few financial records that were available were woefully out of date. There was no record of brothers' rent payments for the preceding 8 months. There's more, but the chapter was headed to a financial meltdown. Realizing the problem, the newly elected VPF engineered a dramatic turnaround. Between November and February, even after adding the new terms billings, the accounts receivable problem had been reduced from 20% to less than 1%. The chapter's debts were being paid on time, and there was money in the bank for activities. A web-based financial system had been implemented with a real-time link to the bank account. In short, the chapter was now financially stable. 90 days, same chapter, same brothers, different approach by a new VPF, very different results. What you do as a VPF matters greatly. So Steve, what's the big picture for the best strategy here?
Well, Chuck, I can name that tune in 3 phrases. Budget it, bill it, and collect it. It starts with budgeting. So create a budget to set dues. Make sure you're charging enough dues to cover your expenses agreement as part of that process. Collect the dues by enforcing the bylaws, and when necessary, having personal one-on-one conversations and generally establishing a chapter-wide culture of accountability.
I know one starting point for collections is the Grand Chapter bylaws. Can you point us towards the right section?
Sure, that's in Article 2 of the Grand Chapter bylaws. There's a section captioned Suspension and Expulsion for Indebtedness. To summarize that section, a member is automatically suspended immediately if their account is 30 days past due, and automatically expelled if their account is 60 days past due. It's pretty easy. I recommend that every vice president of finance and their mentor print it out or bookmark those pages for easy reference.
So how do you best apply those bylaws?
Again, remember those 3 phrases, budget it, bill it, and collect it. I'm budgeting, I recommend an annual budget, that is budget for both semesters or all 3 quarters if you're on a quarter system. At a minimum, finalize the budget prior to the last meeting of the term for the following term. Bill it in a way to ensure timely payment and collection. And that means the timing in the invoice really is the magic. Having dues payable no later than the first meeting of the term and sending the billing notices out at least a month before that. For example, a chapter that has their first spring meeting on January 20th would have their dues payable on or before then and would send the bill no later than December 20th. That means suspensions by mid-February. And let's face it, no one wants to get suspended just as the semester is getting interesting. And there must be consequences for not paying, or some members just won't pay. Getting signed membership agreements from everybody and signed payment plans as needed as well. And Greek Bill has features that make that very easy. And finally, you collect it by enforcing the 30/60 policy. That's why that's there. Clearly communicate the consequences and options for payment ahead of time to encourage timely payment. And members will catch on fast when they realize that their e-board will enforce the rules.
Got it. Budget, bill it, and collect it. And the timing of the billing is the magic. So how do we build a timely payment into the chapter's culture?
Well, you need to keep it front and center. Vice presidents of finance should report accounts receivable as part of the finance report at each e-board and chapter meeting and monthly to the ABC. For successful collections, e-boards need to get behind this, especially the chaplain, the president, and the vice president of programming.
What's your number one collection tip?
Well, if someone hasn't paid, start with a one-on-one conversation as soon as possible, or ask a member of your committee to do so. That'll be much more productive than a generic announcement at the chapter meeting or a text or an email. Plus, a brother may be experiencing financial hardship and may feel embarrassed about it. There is a place for brotherly love here in those situations.
What's the timeline we should use for collections?
Well, a clearly communicated timeline gives brothers an incentive to pay on time, again, with consequences. At 1 day late, have a $10 fine, typically established through the local chapter bylaws. At 30 days late, you suspend him. No activities, can't participate in chapter events. At 60 days late, expel him and send him to collections. Note that an expelled brother can pay and be reinstated according to the bylaws.
If you do that, you'll get most of your dues collected in a timely fashion. I've seen that in chapters I work with too. But what about the cases where that doesn't work?
Well, the reality is it's inevitable that there will be situations that need special consideration. That's true in life, and that's true in a chapter. Exceptions should be, number one, rare, number two, for real financial hardship, not just convenience, and two, captured in a written payment plan.
Yeah, I worked with a chapter recently that had an alumnus who owed some money, and they tried to reach out to him, and he said he didn't have the money, but then he drove off in his brand new Tesla. Anyway, let's jump up a level. Why do we even have to charge money?
Well, it's an old saying, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Operating a chapter costs money, and every member needs to pay their share. SIGEP membership is based on a principle of equal rights and responsibilities, and responsibility includes financial responsibility to the chapter. It's just not fair to those who pay if others take the benefits and don't pay their share. One way to promote a culture of shared responsibility is to be transparent in recruitment about the time and financial commitments involved in joining the chapter.
Well, isn't this all a lot of extra work for the VPF?
No, actually, it makes life much easier for him. Managing the finances in this way greatly reduces the time and the stress of having to collect from most members, frankly. Vice presidents of finance, remember, you'll appreciate that, especially when you're getting ready for finals.
So, Steve, this billing timing magic sounds great. Have you had any experiences where it worked?
Yeah, absolutely. For several semesters, a chapter I worked with had huge collection issues. They were billing dues, sending the invoices out well after the start of the semester. This created big cash flow problems for holding events during the semester because the money wasn't coming in. And there were still a lot of outstanding receivables by finals. The VPF spent a lot of time chasing people to pay dues when he really needed to focus on getting himself prepared for finals. By taking the single step of moving invoicing to the month prior to the start of the semester, as we talked about earlier, the next semester, immediately the next semester, they had a 90% collection rate within 2 months of the start of the semester. None of this was heavy lifting. Small actions do have big effects. Same chapter, same brothers, different approach, and just a small change by the VPF, but very different results.
Well, thank you, Steve, for sharing your time and expertise. Big picture, budget it, bill it, collect it. Use the bylaws, and the timing of bills is the magic. Thank you also to our listeners. It's a great day to be a SIGEP.